Let's see, so one more quick thing about databases. This is kind of a key and one of the major pieces of what I think would allow this type of looking at what's going on with students and this type of interfacing with a database to really function well for everybody. There are two basic ideas I want to show here. First, what I'll be trying to show is that one database can be interfaced through an outline format, which we've already seen, in something that looks like a spreadsheet. And then I'm going to show this sort of 2D nested ontological structure that I've got going on. So that's one of them, is the idea that there are different ways to look at the same information that's in a database so that people who are more or less familiar with different types of computer interfaces can all add to and benefit from the same database of student information. The second thing that I'm going to be focusing on here is an ability to look from different perspectives at the same information. Whereas before, I could say, with that endangered species list, that my main perspective is what's their red list status, and then I want to sort that by is their population going up or down. Just as easily, you say which population is going up and down, sort that by red list. That's really all that this whole slide is going to be about. So if we look at the outline format, you can see, you've got your learning goals. We're starting to get into the whole school realm here. And here would be, say, the 4 big ideas in a particular course which are related to this learning goal. Right? So this is one perspective on information in that database. And here's an equivalent perspective on that information in the database, which is now looking, what are the chapters, what are the, what's the breakdown of the syllabus, and then which learning goals do we hope that a student gets as they learn about Newton? Are the mathematical learning goals? What are the learning goals might they have? That same basic idea from a spreadsheet view. You've got your big ideas as your sort of like parent or master category with your learning goals, and their intersections exist in both views, whereas from one you might have element 1A, the same content is viewed as element A1. Is anything jumping? Okay, fabulous. Then finally, this ontological nesting view. It's all the same information. It's a big idea. It's your 4 big ideas, each one having its own associated learning goals. Still hanging out generic here. I know A's, B's, and 1s and 2s probably don't make a ton of sense for what you do in your regular life. But it's very easy to look at a course from the perspective of big ideas, or to look at a course from the perspective of learning goals. Now that's just when you're just looking at stuff, right? So for interacting with this system, what happens is you've got, let's see, so in this case, let's say 2 people are working together to pick the topics and learning goals that will be used in a single course. One of those teachers cares more about learning goals. So they think, well, here's the 7 learning goals that I care about, that I want to force into this class. Which ideas from that course fit into my learning goal? Now, if this teacher removes big idea from learning goal A, says circles have absolutely nothing to do with this square diagram, that element is removed. Big idea 2, learning goal A, does not exist here. So any work you do here is done for anybody from any perspective. Indeed, if somebody made a change over here, that change would pass on through to somebody who's looking at interfacing with this database via like a spreadsheet. So if you removed big idea 4A from the other one, it's gone here. It's gone from the other perspective. Then once again, just to beat this horse, if you remove learning goal B from big idea 1, you will not find big idea 1 in learning goal B. So however you prefer to interface with this database, you can do that and still be communicating in the language from the perspective of anybody else who's working with the same database. Then you may want to do searches. Okay, so we built this thing, and now somebody wants to come in and evaluate my course. And the only thing maybe this particular evaluator cares about is making sure that big ideas, or I'm sorry, that learning goal A is included in your course. So they say, where did learning goal A appear? And they can view it either nested thus or nested thus. Again, similar searches performed in the spreadsheet format. You want to see learning goal A, where does it appear? Without topics 1 and 3. Same again, big ideas 1 appear in these 3 places. Then for the 2D ontological nesting, when you're searching for all instances of big idea 1, you can view it from the perspective of big ideas and see, well, big idea 1 is related to learning goals A, C, and D. You can view that same database from the perspective of learning goals and see that big idea 1 appears in A, C, and D. So I personally think that this is something that would be very useful for the development of a course and for assessment of what's been included in the course, for making sure that it's meeting any sort of external goals. And actually, we'll see some other situations perhaps where this also helps research, performing research. Alright, so now we're going to start getting into things that aren't just A's and B's and 1s and 2s. We'll start looking at an actual example of the AP Biology exam, or course, and what that looks like within a 2D ontological database. It's really not hard to find example syllabi out there. It's not too hard to find on the web examples of standards. And with those syllabi or standards, if you don't know anything about databases, brute force, you can just recast it in one of these things, and that's what I did. If you know anything about databases, I'm sure you could create a program that would turn an existing database information into something that would be viewable here. But again, this is all brute force. So the first view that I'm going to take here is of the AP Biology courses. It's actually a 2-semester course from the perspective of big ideas. So here we have AP Biology. And AP Biology is broken in from, maybe I should mention, this is over 100 pages of information from the AP Bio thing. We're talking about outlines, we're talking about long descriptions. There's 3 different documents that all come together to explain what AP Bio is all about. And you can just zoom in and look at AP Biology and what I think is an easier to understand format here. You can say, all right, well, I just want to zoom in on the process of evolution. What ideas are related to the process of evolution? Well, change in genetic makeup of population over time, right? I mean, you can see these next 4 ideas, they're right there. And you can choose, say, which of these ideas to use in your course. So here's the AP Biology suggestions. You can use any section of this in your course. So instead of reading 100 pages of text to find what from the AP Bio suggestions to use in your course, you just hop on here. Start cruising through. Now again, I said that this was just a breakdown of the content of an AP Biology course from the perspective of topics. And in fact, there are enough topics here that when we've zoomed in this close, you've got yourself a 10-minute section of a single class of what to do, right? It's right there for you. There's your 10-minute talk. But
That was my comment either.
sorry, that wasn't involuntary yet. Yeah. So, all right, but at the same time that we're broadly looking at this course from the idea of big ideas, what are the topics in the course? Once you start zooming in, I mean, you're not just going to talk and then hope that nothing else happens. You're also going to be looking for determining, say, what cross-cutting themes are related to this particular topic. So if you've got a diverse gene pool being important for the survival of species in a changing environment, well, can you figure out a way to make an assignment for your students that helps them understand regulation from the perspective of a diverse gene pool? Right? Jump into regulation. But further, we've got learning goals. Right? So, and the student use mathematics appropriately. Right? This is all again from the AP Bio. I did not make any of this stuff. Can the student use representations and models to communicate scientific phenomena? Right? So now we've already broken this course down into little 10-minute chunks for what you're talking about. That's pretty zoomed in, but we can go a lot further. And really what this allows, by crossing concepts with topics, with learning goals, is more iterations of this same class than we have teachers out there.
Ed?
Yes. That's not a happy face.
No, I'm fascinated by this. So here's a question. So I'm zoomed all the way in to that learning goal of can students use mathematics appropriately. I like this. I think this is really sort of neat, and I'm sort of trying to hack around how I could understand things. But that same learning goal is going to show up in different contexts. That same square bracket Tronny thing that you got going there is going to show up.
I know, I wish I could make it glow.
Okay, someday. So that's going to show up in all kinds of other nested frames. But the student's ability to use mathematics may be apparent in one circumstance and not in another. So while before you had the same object here, that this is, some indexed point in your entire database, now this isn't the same data point, can students use mathematics appropriately, in this other area. This is embedded within all kinds of other pieces.
Absolutely. So,
So I guess what the point is then you could track, can the students use mathematics appropriately, and then track and see all the instances where the students does or does not.
Absolutely.
Well, that's cool.
You're always like a couple of slides ahead.
Okay, well, I think that's an interesting
So I'm
idea.
confused. This is not...
Mike, a couple of steps behind us.
I'm totally confused because, this is not a subject that you're teaching, the ability to use mathematics in biology. That's a mathematics question. So you're implying that somebody knows mathematics enough to be able to use it. That's not a trivial thing to do. Are they the person teaching this course going to stop and teach them the mathematics required to generate models?
If that's a learning goal, if that is a learning goal, forget mathematics.
Is that a learning goal of this biology course, or is that a prerequisite to this biology course?
Who cares?
Who
cares?
It makes a big difference if you're teaching
Right,
it
that
well.
depends on the
and that's
teacher
a-
and the group or the community. But in terms of this instrument here, let's say it were a learning goal, or let's say let's pick a learning goal that everybody does agree on that spans many different topic areas.
Let's stay with this one in particular. If I was teaching this course, and I was asked whether students, am I going to take a half of the course or a quarter of the course to teach the student how to use mathematics to do modeling of biological systems?
No,
Well, that
actually,
wouldn't be
part
your
of what
learning
this
goal.
does
You
is
wouldn't
allow
have that
to
as a
really
goal
focus
in your
the time
course.
spent.
You'd have that as a prerequisite.
That's not even the point. The point is that if it were your learning goal, you could figure out the 10 different places in the course where students use math. And this would allow you to organize, so you would be able to see.
Not only that, you'd also be able to see whether or not students are achieving, or at what level students are being able to demonstrate their capacity at using mathematics in these 10
in
different
those
contexts.
contexts.
So if you weren't good at math, instead of having the 10 different fields being all a little bit lower, like, oh, they're just not real great at any of these, you could zero in math, so they suck at math, but they're doing good on everything else. It's not that they're not very good at these 10 individual topics. You could,
Yeah, absolutely. If you're in here and you're zoomed in on a diverse pool, you've seen that these kids understand science as a process, and you've got a few different types of questions in there. You can see, well, this student's really good at using models, but terrible at using math. And I won't go too far about how from there you can create individualized learning goals by saying, well, here's what the student's actually good at, and we can keep them busy for the rest of their life learning more about what they're already good at. Or you can go back and buffer and add a little bit of this, but this may still be a little bit abstract because I haven't talked about what do you actually do once you have this union. I'm gonna get there in a second, but first just
Can you go back for just a second? Because I wanted to follow up on what I think Noah was saying.
okay.
The other Noah. And
Not you.
It's the union of Noah. Well, not that kind. Never mind. Okay.
Please God,
stay out of it. So, if you can go back to that screen you had, I don't know what to call it because it's not a
Prezi
slide.
view.
Prezi view. Can you go back to your Prezi view?
Sure.
Yeah, that one. So, I guess the way, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the way I'm interpreting this is that right there, number 2, I can't read it. What is it? Say, the
This is
student
the math
can
one?
use, yeah, that's the one I thought. The student can use mathematics appropriately. So, that number 2 appears in other big ideas.
Definitely.
So, I think, I don't know if this is exactly what you meant, but is that number 2 the same as the number 2 in the other big ideas? Because it seems like you're implying that the student can use mathematics appropriately is a condition that's the same under all big ideas. But you may see that number 2, that, this number 2 appears to be something that the student can do under big idea 1, but not under
Yeah,
big idea
and that's
2.
one of the things you would be looking for, because
So that's what you're
in fact,
looking for.
So this is just like
the
A2
student
that
can
you
use
indexed
mathematics
before.
in
Okay, got
context,
it.
and the
A2
students
is-
would.
Right.
I would expect them to be able to use the mathematics much more effectively in some contexts than in others.
Okay.
Because
So this is the whole point of that Ed was making is this is not 2. This is A2, or in fact, this
A2.
is like
A2.
6 levels down indexed.
Although
But you could.
Okay.
this thing itself does still carry its own information along further.
Yeah,
Let
you
me-
could extract all instances of 2.
So before there was AP biology
Look at the percent.
from the
Wait,
perspective
can
of
you
the big topic.
That's what it's going to go do right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah, okay.
Now I'm looking at AP biology from the perspective of cross-cutting themes. Right. So these are 2 teachers who are building a course. One of them's like, these are the topics that we need to do. The other has just decided these are the cross-cutting themes we need to have. They then look at each other's screens and place, say, these topics inside of a cross-cutting theme. So here was that same theme of evolution, and we can see that appears in these topics. Maybe I should go down this one. And again, from there, within topics, you can zoom in as far as you want. So we have cross-cutting themes, topics, and learning goals. But that same learning goal that would be at the union of, whatever we were calling it, A6, B1 or whatever, exists at B1, A6. Right? It's the same thing in that realm, but you can track whether a student did really good with science as a process, or if did really good with relationships of structures to function, or if they just really understood a topic really well. So those are like 2 different ways of looking at it, but it all overlaps and intertwines.
So I think I understand what you're doing now, I think. But there's something wrapped up in the language that you're using
Probably.
about that actually I think it's the what I'm going to call the ontology of this system, even though you're calling the system ontology. There's a different meaning of the word ontology.
Ontology or ontology.
What is the nature of these things that you're talking about? And you're saying this is the union of, say, 1, 2, 3, or the union of the big ideas with the learning goals. But in order to have a union, you're assuming that those are still things that exist separately on their own and that manifest themselves in some certain way when they're unionized.
Absolutely.
That's your assumption. Okay.
Definitely.
Because I guess what I'm wondering is whether A2, say A2 is, evolution and mathematics, and B2 is genetics and mathematics or something like that. I guess what I'm wondering is whether that 2 that you're assuming implies that there's something underlying both of those that is both mathematics is really the same, or whether the A2 and B2 are actually completely disjoint things, completely separate ways of knowing. Does that make sense?
No, it does, and I'm trying to think of which slide I'm on.
I mean, I'm not saying that your assumption is wrong. I'm just making sure that that's the assumption you're working with.
Yeah, it definitely is. You know,
Okay.
I mean, so something we'll get to again in the future, and I may just have to repeat it for you when I get there, because I might not remember that I'm saying this now. But if you have a student who in a math class learned, say, like a statistics course, supposedly learned or was exposed to significant difference, right? And now significant difference shows up in a physics course and then shows up in a biology course. It may be apparent that the student was better at recognizing the significant significant difference between the size of two bears might be easier for them, you know, than the size of two atoms, right? And so you can look at not only the specific mathematical tool that's being used, but in which contexts they get it better, and perhaps from there be like, well, if we're going to teach students about significant difference, and it seems like they're all doing better with that tool in biology than they are in physics, then show it to them in biology first, and if they seem to get it, then move them on to physics.
So I see what you're saying. I think part of the thing that's just kind of is just sort of an itch that I have is that what you're doing is you're stating a priori categorization of the things that are the knowledge elements that students have. So you're saying significant difference is a knowledge element, and that can manifest itself in some contexts and not others. But you're still saying that significant difference is like a thing that students have and know, and it either is apparent that they know it in one context and not apparent that they know it in another context, which is a very different way of thinking about knowledge than saying when students are in biology, they see this thing that looks to us like significant difference, but to them it's just this thing in biology.
And I think that at the point that somebody has recognized that something that was at some point categorized as significant difference but appeared in biology, and that students were doing really well there, that's a place to research. To go, okay, so what are they actually thinking? And what are the facets of thinking?
I think one could, after analyzing a lot of data on this, one could change one's mind about what are the useful knowledge elements. You just start with this as a basis. And then as you start to recognize patterns, you may decide that it really is not useful to call this a knowledge element.
Well, it's interesting to talk about basis, because if you start with a certain basis set, the question is, will you be able to know how to change your basis set later on by analyzing the data?
Well, the question is, do your original categories, I mean, one, what's the validity of these? I mean, you're taking it from biology. They may be unrelated to understanding it. There may be some artifact of the way people construct a course. Meaning the fact that you say a physics textbook, they all look the same, may have nothing to do with the way people learn physics. Right? Maybe just that's the way physics textbooks are organized. So the question is, how do you, do you have this problem about, so this is like almost like a protein folding problem in the sense that if you started someplace, you may not be able to fold correctly. And the question is, can this system correct itself so that it discovers that, I think what Noah's talking about, you've given something misplaced concreteness. You're assuming that this thing is real, where it's really a symptom of something underlying that's actually real. And, is there a way to get for this thing to revise itself?
Absolutely.
In a meaningful way?
Absolutely.
Or does your original construct of how these things go force the whole system into one dead end or another dead end? Because that could easily happen too, right? You could generate these artificial categories that are not actually related to anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, at some level, that's not Ed's fault.
No, but I'm just saying, if you're going to use it, but if you're going to use it, you want to be aware of the possibility that
So
the
you want to do a
state
step.
determines the outcome.
You want to be a step further, I think, than Ed's goals, or maybe Ed's got an answer to this, which is, how is it that you take and fit in with the existing institutional structures that value knowledge as it is, that values the physics textbook and learning goals that are established, and how do you also then leave it open enough to be transformative for new possible futures about how it is that we think about student learning and evaluating student learning?
Well, that's the question. Does this have a mechanism for transforming the way we think about student knowledge?
I sincerely hope so. And
or
Isn't that a tall order?
Or is it? It is a tall order. Yeah, but I mean,
Tall guy.
I guess. I guess my question is the goal to give people a different way of slicing up all the things, the degree to which students appear to know the things that we defined ahead of time.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's a way of re-slicing up stuff that we're already assuming are predefined structures.
We've been
And
given
that's
these.
different from-
We've been
and-
given
and
these
I'm not
two
saying
functions.
that to- I'm not saying
won't
that's a bad
something
thing.
emerge? Won't if there is a problem in the way it's structured and you're looking at the
We
data
don't- yeah.
and you see, it seems to
That's-
me like
that's
this would
my
allow
question.
you to see something like, that's funny, these are all classified under the same category and yet students never get this, so maybe it isn't actually the same thing as these other things that are in this category, which would then, you as a person looking at it, would say, that doesn't fit, and then you'd want to think about it.
That'd be great.
Do something else, whatever
And
the next step is, I don't know, but it seems to me like it would emerge from your analysis of what the program is showing you.
Yeah, emergent categorization
That'd be
is,
great.
is one of the things that I'll focus on if we make it to the part of the talk. It's about how this can function as qualitative
Where
research
exactly
software.
are we in the course of the talk? Are
We're just-
halfway
we're-
through, or
No. But
curious.
I can speed it up a little bit. The first thing that I'd like to just throw in here now, because it's kind of related to some of the complaints or worries that have been brought up, is instead of using the AP Biology existing outline, you can develop this thing from scratch. Of course, you got to find some people who would have interest in helping categorize this stuff and have the knowledge to do that. Pretty obvious first step. And then the next steps are pretty straightforward. I mean, you're just asking people again, what are the big ideas in your class? What do you think are the learning goals in your class? What are the cross-cutting themes? Send this out in emails, embed a form and a website. And as the answers are coming back in, you're categorizing the answers. You're checking for an exhaustive yet complete list of categories, right? So you ask what are the big ideas in biology, you get 16 different answers from 1,000 people. At some point, you can probably guess, well, I think this is all that anybody who's participated knows about biology. So this is a good enough place to
Yeah,
start.
but half of those could be wrong. That's the problem.
Well, they could, and they can be voted on.
And what's their motivation for participating? I think, I get requests for this kind of information, and I typically don't respond.
Well, I don't know that I can pay the same that
Even if they give you
AP pays, but,
enter you in a drawing for a free certificate.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the grants that I think are tailored, I swear they just wanted to give me, as far as it's a research coordination network grant. I think this is a magnificent way to coordinate research, and we're actually going to come up on that really quickly. In fact, I don't think that I need to go through explaining how it is that once you've categorized something, then you ask somebody else to subcategorize that. Pretty sure you can all follow that thought through. So I'm going to move along here. For an idea of where we're at, we're now moving on to here. All right, so
Well, so Ed, just sort of to pause structurally, I mean, clearly we're going to have like a second round on this, I think, or you're going to have to skip to the end.
Yeah.
So, your job in the next 20 minutes or whatever it is to share enough information so that we must have you back to continue this discussion.
I'm pretty sure I already did that, but all right.
Okay.